Hi everyone, I hope you are all well. It's the day after Halloween. It's Sunday. It's been certainly wet and wild here in the south of England for sure. Good job I didn't buy loads of Halloween sweets and such because not one trick-or-treater knocked on the door last night, but then I'm not surprised given what's going on in the world. It's been a bit of a funny week, hasn't it? It looks like we're going back into lockdown again. We've lost Sean Connery. Halloween was cancelled. It's just, yeah, a bit of an odd week, to say the least. So I've very much been I've been watching loads of movies of late, some really crappy ones off Netflix, but still, I'm like, you know what? I'm just in a movie mood. I need cheering up after the craziness of what's going on in the world. And it is that time of year, though. If you've seen a video I did ages ago, I was talking about this time of year. I very much bounce about with things that I like to do in my spare time. So I usually I pick to a certain genre, or I watch loads of box sets or something. So like binge watch like all the Doctor Who's or something like that. But this time of year, I'm very much, okay, I'm going to spend these 2 hours watching this musical, and then the next 2 hours I'm going to watch X-Men, and the next, I'm like, there's no distinct focus on a certain genre, so my mind's all skittish and all about, and I'm starting to really get that feeling now. But yeah, going into the second lockdown, let's see how that goes. But I survived the first, so I'll survive the second. So it's going to be fine. I'm just carrying on with what I was doing before. And just to make it clear, I'm not, I'm not breaking rules, but with me, I have pretty much stayed to myself, and I've had a certain routine that I've followed since March, and I'm still just going to carry on with that routine because it still doesn't break the rules. And I like the fact that we can still do social bubbling, so I can still go visit my mum and dad. And I'm actually going to be going to visit them today to have a nice Sunday lunch with them. So you'll be viewing this video. It'll be uploaded today via my mum and dad's absolutely awesome fast broadband, which I don't have at my house. But anyway, enough about that. Let's talk about the book I've been reading this week. Well, the majority I read it yesterday, actually, and that is The Devil in the White City by Erik Larson. So because I've been having a bit of a funny week, like I said, my brain's sort of been scattering, and I want to spend my evenings watching this all over the place. I haven't really focused on reading. And then yesterday I had just a whole day free, and I was like, you know what, I'm only like 80 pages through this book. Let me just see how far through this book I can get. And by about 7:30 last night, my eyes was just so tired, but I was still so enthralled by the book. And I realised I'd read 300 pages. And I was like, oh, geez, no wonder my eyes are so tired. So I put it down and I've finished it this morning. I got up early and finished it this morning. And I am really, really impressed with this book. I don't believe I've read any of Erik Larson's books before. So I don't think I have. But yeah, I think I definitely want to have a look at his. I don't think there's actually a book list for him in here. No, there isn't, so I can't see what other books he's written, but I'm going to look into that just to confirm. But I really do think I haven't read any of his books before. Now, if you don't know what The Devil in the White City is about, this is basically about two men. It's a non-fiction book, but the style of it is not a standard non-fiction book. And it's set in Chicago in 1893, and it follows David Burnham, who's this guy here, and H.H. Holmes, this guy here. Now, H.H. Holmes, everybody knows, is the very well-known serial killer who had the murder house or murder hotel in Chicago. But David Burnham actually built the Chicago exposition. So it was basically this mammoth event where people could see like all these wonders of the world, and there was like circus, and there were all these big shows and restaurants and such, and it had to be constructed, and he basically constructed it, and it was known as the White City. And directly across the road from the White City at the exact same time was H.H. Holmes building his murder hotel. And with lots of people flocking to Chicago, absolutely thousands upon thousands of people flocking to Chicago to see this exposition, it meant that there was lots of people who he could pick off. Now, one thing that the writer makes very clear in the opening of this book, in his first chapter, not the introduction, but in the first chapter, is at that time, Chicago had a very high death rate. There were constant accidents, murders, stuff, domestic violence. There was a lot of stuff going around. And so the whole quote with H.H. Holmes is that it's believed that he killed hundreds. It's possible that he killed hundreds, but experts think it's probably around 30. But the reason why they think that it could be in the hundreds is obviously he moved about a lot, so there could have been victims throughout his period traveling, but also the fact that 167 people who visited the Chicago exposition, which was which was directly across the road from his murder hotel, went missing and were never found again. Now, because of that, people are like, oh, well, they must have all been killed by H.H. Holmes. No, well, there's a possibility that some of them were, but that doesn't mean that is absolutely true. So that's why I think in the opening chapter he makes it very clear that accidents and murders and such happened a lot in Chicago around that time. And even in the course of this book, the mayor gets murdered. Like he gets assassinated whilst in his house. It's just so there was a lot of stuff going on. And even in the opening chapter he talks about how people got hit by trains and the trams often, so much so that children were known to like pick up the severed heads and like play with them and stuff like that with it, because it was just so common. It didn't faze them. So it was a very interesting time in Chicago in 1893. I don't know anything about Chicago apart from because I love Chicago Fire and I watch like Chicago Med. That's literally the most I know about locations within Chicago. So I was, I don't know anything about the history unless it's a place or someone that they refer to on those TV programs. I know zip all. So so some names I was like, oh. Yeah, I remember that place. Yeah, because of an episode of Chicago Fire. Yeah, I know where that is. But yeah, other than that, I knew sod all about the city and who basically ran it, who dealt with the money and the construction of it. No sodding clue. So this was a real. This was a real eye-opener. This was really something for me to learn from, and I really learned a lot. That the style of it is so interesting. It reads like a fictional book. It really does. And sometimes you're like, and this is non-fiction? Hey, okay. So I can totally understand why Martin Scorsese, because this just suits him. This story, I can see the shots that he will use for the film. This suits him to a T. That Martin Scorsese got the film rights for this, and there was a whole thing that Leonardo DiCaprio was going to play H.H. Holmes, and then it just went really quiet. I don't know if the project is completely off now, or if COVID, caused it to be shelved. I have no idea. But they actually put stamped. It's not a sticker. It's stamped on the cover saying "soon to be a major Martin Scorsese film" on this cover. So as far as I know, it's still happening, but don't know. And yeah, because it's written like a fictional book, it's so interesting, the language that Erik uses. It's so enthralling, absolutely extraordinarily written. And the opening chapter and the closing chapter are mirrored in that they take place on the Olympic and the Titanic, because Benham had a very close friend and colleague who was on the Titanic when he was on the Olympic on April 14th, 1912. And the Olympic was one of the boats that kind of responded to the Titanic's plea for help. And very sadly, his friend died. And but in the opening chapter, it's like, okay, I don't know who these characters are. I don't get the connections, because obviously it's the opening, it's the introduction. You're not going to know this relationship. And then once you go through the book and understand how they work together and stuff about them, it really did feel like a loss. But what is so interesting is the way that he finds the connections, the mirrors, and writes them so beautifully and sometimes very darkly and in a very sinister manner. But it's important what he's done. So the construction of the white city, the bright city for this expo that's going to, gather all these people together, is happening across the road where this very dark and sinister building is being constructed. I loved the mirroring, especially things that I didn't know about, like with the detective who hunted down H.H. Holmes and caught him, was a man who a year before had lost his wife and all of his children in a house fire. So he literally had a house of horrors that he lived with every day in his mind, in his life, and he entered the house of horrors of H.H. Holmes and went, right, I've got to find this guy because he doesn't deserve life. My family were taken from me when they should have survived, and I'm not going to let that man live another minute longer for what he did. And his focus on trying to find H.H. Holmes was astonishing. I loved that there were so many characters in this book. It so suits a film, the way this is written. It's extraordinary story. But you had, people like Buffalo Bill turning up, and who else was there? There was, George Ferris, who invented the Ferris Wheel, and you go through all of the construction of the Ferris Wheel and how in 1 week alone of this expo, that ran for, I think it was a good month or more. I lie. Sorry, scrap that, because it opened in June and it closed in October. So it was open all summer. In 1 week, the Ferris Wheel alone generated a profit, which in modern money is $800,000. In 1 week, that's the profit for that one ride out the whole thing in 4 months. Can you imagine how much money this thing generated? It's unreal. Thomas Edison popped up as well, which was really cool. And there are so many other names. And of course, because the Titanic is also linked to this as well, you get various people on the Titanic who get brought through. But what I found so extraordinary is the way that he constructed it, where it wasn't a 50-50 split between, one chapter H.H. Holmes, one chapter Daniel Burnham. It was more, I'd say, about 60-40, with 60 being for Daniel and 40 for H.H. Holmes. But that totally makes sense, because obviously there are so many documents and so much information regarding the development of the expo and the life of these various characters compared to what we know about H.H. Holmes. We know a lot about H.H. Holmes, but at the same time, there's a lot that isn't known because he took it to his grave. He was secretive about it. So he puts all of these documents, this evidence in linear order. And so H.H. Holmes pops up when the same time that certain events happening with Daniel in the construction of this expo, that we have some information about H.H. Holmes. So it isn't like he's doing it on purpose, like he's completely marketed as being a specific H.H. Holmes book, when it's not. But he does give the evidence as it appears, which is very good thing to do in my eye. And when it needs to be brutal, it is brutal, but only when it needs to be. So when I say that, what I mean specifically is that he only has you witness, as it were, one murder, one murder that H.H. Holmes did. And even then, it's pretty tough going. Sorry, I need to clear my throat. It's pretty tough going, but that's it. With all of the other victims, they've disappeared. This is the last time we see them. There is, nearer the end, though, a discovery about children's remains, which broke my fucking heart. And something that I just couldn't fathom at all is that when you get to the court, they actually brought the remains of victims into the court to present as evidence, while their family is sat there with no clue this is going to happen. And one witness took to the stand to give evidence and was presented with her husband's head. And they thought that was okay. Are you kidding me with this? It's just like, that is unreal. That is unreal. But they did that. So it's sometimes some chapters with the H.H. Holmes part are very hard to read, but he's only says or only covers what is necessary to cover, which I thought was very respectful to those who were affected by this, and the families of victims, and some victims who are missing to this very day. And I'm just going to read you the chapter of when Anna falls as one of his victims, and this is the description. I'm going to read out that I said this is the most graphic that he goes with what his victims went through until you get to the chapter near the end, as I said, when children's remains are found and the police uncover some things. It's called Claustrophobia. Okay. Holmes knew that most, if not all, of his hotel guests would be at the fair. He showed Anna the drugstore, the restaurant, the barber shop, and took her up to the roof to give her a broader view of Englewood. Englewood's the location where the hotel and the expo is. That this is him, basically presenting what he's made to her. And the pretty tree-shaded neighbourhood that surrounded his corner. He ended the tour at his office, where he offered Anna a seat and excused himself. He picked up a sheaf of papers and began reading. Distractedly, he asked Anna if she would mind going into the adjacent room, the walk-in vault, to retrieve for him a document that he'd left inside. Cheerfully, she complied, and Holmes followed her quietly. At first, it seemed as though the door had closed by accident. The room was utterly without light. Anna pounded on the door and called for Harry. She listened, then pounded again. She wasn't frightened, she was more embarrassed, but did not like the darkness, which was more complete than anything she had ever experienced. Far darker, certainly, than any moonless night in Texas. She rapped the door with her knuckles and listened again. The air grew stale. Holmes listened. He sat peacefully in his chair by the wall, that separated his office and the vault. Time passed. It was really peaceful. Very peaceful. A soft breeze drifted through the room, cross-ventilation being one of the benefits of the corner office. The breeze, still cool, carried the morning scent of prairie grasses and moist soil. Anna removed her shoe and beat the heel against the door. The room was growing warmer. Sweat filled her face and arms. She guessed that Harry, unaware of her plight, had gone elsewhere in the building. That would explain why he still had not come despite her pounding. Perhaps he'd gone to check on something in the shop below. As she considered this, she became a bit frightened. The room had grown substantially warmer. Catching a clean breath was difficult, and she needed a bathroom. He would be so apologetic. She could not show him how afraid she was. She tried shifting her thoughts to the journey they would begin that afternoon, that she, a Texas schoolma'am, soon would be walking the streets of London and Paris, still seemed an impossibility, yet Harry had promised it and made all the arrangements. In just a few hours she would board a train for the short trip to Milwaukee, and soon after she, Minnie and Harry would be on their way to the lovely cool valley of the St. Lawrence River between New York and Canada. She saw herself sitting on the spacious porch of some fine riverside hotel, sipping tea and watching the sun descend. She hammered the door again, and now also the wall between the vault and Harry's breeze-filled office. The panic came, as it always did. Holmes imagined Anna crumbled in a corner. If he chose, he could rush to the door, throw it open, hold her in his arms, and weep with her at the tragedy of just barely averted. He could do that at the last minute, or the last few seconds. He could do that. Or he could open the door and look in on Anna and give her a big smile, just to let her know that this was no accident, and then close the door again, slam it and return to his chair and see what happened next. Or he could flood the vault right now with gas. The hiss and repulsive odour would tell her just as clearly as his smile that something extraordinary was underway. He could do any of those things. He had to concentrate to hear the sobs from within. The airtight fittings, the iron walls, and the mineral wool insulation deadened most of the sound, but he had found with experience that if he listened at the gas pipe, he heard everything much more clearly. This was the time that he most craved. It brought him a period of sexual release that seemed to last for hours, even though in fact the screams and pleading faded rather quickly. He filled the vault with gas, just to be sure. So as you can see, that's really quite uncomfortable, but he is doing it because it's important to let you know how Holmes calculated, how he thought about Anna as a person, this woman who entered his life, who he made believe he would sweep off her feet and take her to the world, and she became one of his victims, one of his many victims, and we don't even know what the final number is. But it wasn't. That's pretty much to the full. There is more, but that's pretty much to the darkest chapter that he goes until you find children near the end of the book. But the way, as you can see from that, the way that he has written it is not a standard non-fiction book where you expect it to be more academic and referencing certain documents and quoting specific quotes from them. It isn't like that. And I think that's what has really captured people's imaginations when they've read this book. And so it makes sense that Martin Scorsese picked this up as a possible next film contender. And as to when that film will be made, I have no clue, but I'd be very interested to see it when it does get made. I was really taken aback by it. I was very surprised by what I read, and I really thoroughly enjoyed it. It was so well put together. It was respectful without being ghoulish, but there was one little bit where I was just a bit, now that I've read The Five by Haley Rubenhold, sorry, I can't get my words right today. There is a reference to Jack the Ripper and such, because Jack the Ripper's killings happened when H.H. Holmes was starting to construct his murder house or murder hotel, and so they refer to how the Jack the Ripper's victims were just prostitutes, and I'm like, no, they're not, they weren't, so please don't do that. But then, it is what it is. But yeah, it was very respectful, and I did love the fact that in the notes section and indexes and all that at the end, Erik refers to it that he doesn't use the internet. He goes by his historical senses that he uses actual documents that he can read, that he can ponder over and such to find the information that he needs, which I really love. I really respect that, and you can feel it, I think. And he read a lot of diaries and such, and H.H. Holmes's books, confessions collection. He wrote 3, and yeah, you can really feel his love and his respect for the characters in this, obviously, apart from H.H. Holmes, because how can you love H.H. Holmes? But he really respected everyone involved and the story that he was able to find amongst all these documents, and he wrote that story very, very well, I think. So well done, Erik, for this. So, to summarise, would I read this again? Yes, definitely. I think it was a really, really well constructed, so immersive, captures imagination so well. I think it's great. Would I recommend this to anyone? Yes, and I'm actually, after I finish filming this and therefore heading over to my mum and dad's, I'm going to be lending it to my dad, because my dad saw that I had it on my coffee table the other week, and he was like, "Oh, I didn't know you had this," and he started flicking through it. And I promised him that when I was done, he could borrow it. So I'm definitely, yes, recommending it to people. Would I read any more of Erik's books? I think I would, yeah. It was so immersive. The way that he's written this is really, really well put together. So, as I said, I don't think I've read any other of Erik's books, but I will certainly look up his other books later today and see if any capture my interest and may go on my Amazon wish list. So yeah, we'll see how we go. So those are my thoughts on The Devil in the White City. Have you read this book? I'd love to know what you think. Leave me a comment in the comments box below, or give me a thumbs up, thumbs down, entirely up to you, I'll let you decide. And I've got my other video, my announcement video, the next books I'm going to be reading, which you can go look at and find out the next book you will be getting a review of. All right, guys, bye.